Alright guys, this is Khan, uh, more commonly known as Conduit, and I'm gonna be teaching you guys everything I know about PvP in Red Dead. Um, Admittedly that is, largely subjective, but I'm gonna teach you what I know, and we'll see what's going on. There's a few things we need to cover before we go over any cards or anything like that. Um, First off, so this is my recommended setting setup for everyone who's pretty much everybody. There are a few things that are iffy. Um, I don't like vibration, so I turn it off unless I'm going to be doing collectibles. I think that unless you're one of those free aim gods, there are a few people we know like that, um, that wide is just the best lock-on mode, both on foot and on horse. I don't think you should ever have them different. If you're free aim, you should be free aim all the time, just because I think it makes you have inconsistencies. I think, again, if you're gonna be, not free aiming, you might as well abuse auto aim as much as you can. Make sure your aim assist strength is stupid strong on foot and on horse. Automatic pin switching I don't like on the Lamats. I don't really use them, but when I have them I like to control it, so I keep that off. I think that standard FPS, either 1 or 2, I think that they're kinda just the best settings in the game. Um, Although, I suppose if you're running an Elite controller, you could make the argument that you could play on default. I prefer to have paddles in the back for other buttons. I don't find that the horse control matters, so I don't fuck with it. Your look sensitivity, your aim sensitivity, your acceleration. I think they should be all the way up all the time, personally. If you can't control that, of course, knock it down a peg or two. But I don't think you should ever be, low sense in this game. I think that having more ability to wheel around in an instant is much more important. Your dead zone, you may have to raise your dead zone to like here at max if you have like a finicky stick, but most of the time your dead zone should be all the way down. I don't play in first person, but I keep my controls exactly the same, except that I change my sense down just a hair because it messes with me otherwise. Um, so I like toggle to run personally, especially on standard FPS. You click the stick in once and you run forwards. For me, that's a holdover from Halo. Um, Tap assist. Now, this is actually something that is arguable. 4 times and hold are both very, very good. Take your pick. Hold will let you hold down the button and beat anyone with a relatively slow tap speed. 4 times will get you more taps in. Like, if you can spam really fast, 4 times better. I'm lazy, I like hold. Fishing, I don't mess with fishing. You can also invert, of course, if you like that. Secondly, in your display, right? I turn my sharpness all the way up because that's going to give you the best clarity, and clarity is important, especially like when you're sniping in the rain. It gives you just a little bit more visibility. I don't change too much. I keep almost everything on dynamic, except my HUD. I do some things with my HUD. I like the dot reticle. Now, if you're heavy into using slip, or if you aren't very familiar with how weapon spread more or less works, simple's a good one too. I don't recommend running no reticle, but some people are really good at it. But I like the dot. I think that you should keep it small, although I've heard arguments that having the bigger one is easier for some people because you just blot out the head. Beyond that, I like my radar to be expanded. I think everyone should play with radar expanded. I don't find your GPS matters. I like my blip sizes being large. Now, that's just because it gives you an extra couple of feet to see when people come onto your radar. You can put them as small and get a little more detailed as to where people are on the map, but I don't find that anything but really direction matters. So that's why I do that. Everything else is on default. I believe that's everything I do. Oh, And because I make videos and stuff, my volumes are different. But you should have your output set to headphones, because then you hear things directionally better. Just make sure you don't put your headset on backwards. I don't think I have anything in general that's different. No, I don't. So that's my settings recommendations. If you play Paint, there is no reason at all not to run pretty much the exact setup, because of course Paint makes it where you have no bloom. Now, let's talk about cards. So this is one of my normal setups. I have a few different ones. I'm not a one-trick pony. I like to switch between setups. This is the setup that I use with Mauser's, the Lancaster, and the Carcano. Eye for an eye, I will normally swap out for Fool Me Once. Never Without One in out-of-community stuff. Or Lens Patience, depending. But this is what I normally run for, moving around. We're using Paint because on anyone that isn't running slow and steady, it's a insta-gib. So, like, let's use Crypts as an example, right? So let's say we're going to paint Crypts, right? Pop it, and you'll paint them as you go above them, right? So, as you lock on, you paint, and you'll slide over the head, right? You get really good at that, and you can just dome people repeatedly. But, of course, everyone's thinking... Excuse me. Everyone's thinking about Never Without One, right? Well, Never Without One only affects the brim, right? Like, so, only from the brim up. So, what I teach all of my guys, what I learned myself, is that you paint about the chin. You try to make the chin your target. And then Never Without One is less of a big deal. It can still stop you, but, it's not a super, super big deal. Winning streak for when you run into tank builds, you can just dump shots in them. Peak condition gives you a little more damage if you have to body somebody. I like the stamina regen. Eye for an Eye is just to save tonics. As I said, for an actual build, like in a war, you would want something more like this for this build. Now, the other are builds that I run pretty frequently, right? This is what I call the max damage sniping build, because it's a max damage sniping build. Who would have guessed? So this right here is max damage. Use a rolling block with it. Okay. Focus fire gives you more damage on on everyone in your posse. So that's just a good team card. If you're running up against tank builds a lot, great. Running up against Slipper a lot, great. Running up against Paint, as long as one guy in your posse's got it, great. Sharpshooter is actually really useless damage-wise. It's for a little bit of tankiness, but it gives you just a hair of enough damage that it can push you over with the other two cards to two-shotting some tank builds. Peak condition is a solid damage boost, and if you're sniping, you're not going to be moving that much, so you always have full stamina. Landon's Patience is, I believe, one of the best cards in the game, because it supercharges your first shot. So as long as you hit your first shot, it's super powerful. Also, in my experience playing with people, most snipers in particular take, 5-6 seconds even to pull their rifle out and aim. So you're getting a substantial damage boost, because Landon's Patience starts building after a half a second, and it caps out at 15. But if you're firing anywhere from, I would say, the 5 to 10 second mark, you're still getting a substantial damage boost. And if you are waiting for the 15 second mark, which, 15 seconds is nothing, you're going to hit really hard. But with these two cards, and then stacking the little bit of damage from Sharpshooter with Focus Fire, you can two-shot most tank builds. There are some that can heal their way through it and the like, and of course there's always Tier 3 tonics minty game that can give it inconsistency, but that is the max damage build. If you're not going to run a sniper rifle and you still want to do a max damage build, swap out to either Gunslinger's Choice or Winning Streak. They're both really, really good. Now, the other builds that I run are modifiers on the tank build. I run 2 different tank builds on different occasions. I, of course, don't run these in the Mafia community or any restricted communities, but this right here is my sniper tank build. Slow and steady makes it where you can't be headshot, you move really slow, and you take a lot of damage. Sharpshooter gives you more tankiness while you're in your scope, and I'll run a short scope Carcano with this with a long scope rolling block. Iron Lung makes you a little tankier depending on your stamina level. You're not running, so Fool Me Once is just for more tank. Like, some people think you should run never without one, and that's just incorrect. Because when your hat gets knocked off, and it will, you're going to take more damage. So you want Fool Me Once on the tank build. The only problem with this build right here is that it is stupid expensive. Like, running this build costs so much money. Like, you're talking well into the $100 to $200 range for a 5-10 minute conflict. It's money. If you get into an hour-long conflict, expect to blow $500-600. Now, the other thing you can do is you can run Unblinking Eye, or you can run Eye for an Eye if you're not going to be using sniper rifles. And that'll let you keep your Deadeye up longer, or let you regen your Deadeye while you're in it. Very valuable cards. You can also run Strange Medicine if you want to hard commit to trying to stay alive longer. The last build that I will run on occasion is the what am I doing? Is the modifier tank build with slip, right? So when I run this build with slip, it's honestly, this is kind of a weird one. So with this build with slip, right? And you could of course swap out Landon's Patience for something else if you prefer. And you could of course swap Eye for an Eye out for something else. But I find that this combination worked extremely well. Slip makes you hard to hit. You're going to be using sniper rifles anyways because of the limitations. I recommend short scope Carcano, long scope rolling block, or long scope rolling block and a bow. Landon's Patience gives you more damage in between shots, and you've got the time because people can't hit you with anything that hits fast. Eye for an Eye makes it to where with your wonderful short scope Carcano, you can just dome people and keep your slip up. Never Without One is a failsafe against snipers, because snipers, of course, and painted bows and the like can insta-gib you. When you have Never Without One and you'll want to wear posse outfits with this, it makes it to where you can tank that one headshot. And that means that you have time to react to the sniper, or to the bow, or to whatever it is. Now, the next few things I'm going to be talking about are general combat, but I'm going to put on a paint build for this, because it's what I'm accustomed to, largely. So, when you're fighting, right, we talked about flicking a little bit earlier, right, where you snap to a target and flick up. In doing that, you're making it to where you can instantly headshot things, and that's a really valuable skill to have, you know. I mean, being able to walk up to any NPC, any fucking player, and just insta-gib them is valuable. I mean, anyone that tells you otherwise is just wrong. I mean, so I'm being stupid here. Okay, so while you're on your horse, of course, all of you that have the Bounty Hunter will know you can duck by pressing X, and I guess this is a time for me to get into this, right? So I run a Xbox Elite controller because I think it's just useful as a tool. I think it's a better quality controller. I keep A and X bound on 2 paddles on the back so that I can do all of this while still aiming around and looking. So I can have 100% mobility on my horse, both with my guns out and otherwise. That's one of the reasons that I have the controller. Now, beyond that, it lets you, of course, crouch and dive while still aiming, which is valuable. So, we were talking about flicks. That's a flick. Now, sometimes you don't want to flick. Sometimes you want to, like, for instance, take your Lancaster out, aim to the side, and kind of flick over laterally. Doing that has some value in that it can be faster if you're smart about it. So one of the things you're going to do a lot in PvP is you're going to corner amp like this, because you want to be able to pop shots at people where they can't really pop them at you. And one of the best things you can do if you're in question is you can poke out with your dead eye up, pop it, jump back like that. That'll save you a lot of headache. Now, so for instance, you can do things like that. And of course I'm slow because I'm bad, but you know, it works. Now, if you were on, say this corner, right? You may not want to aim that way. You can press the left on the D-pad and change the shoulder you're over. But the second you stop aiming, it's going to flip you back over your right shoulder. So be aware of that. And in doing all of that, what you're doing is you're mitigating the chance that your enemies have time to kill you, right? Now, when you don't know what's going on, always retreat. A lot of people try to face rush forever. That's not how you win gunfights, especially against players. Here against NPCs, I can kind of just, chill, do the shit, and, it works. But against players, stuff like that doesn't work. So, one of the other things you can do, and I'll demonstrate it here again. It might take me a few tries because I'm bad, but you can literally dive and paint at the same time. So, dude's here. See, I paint his shoulder. I want his head. And then as soon as you stand up, he's dead. And that's just a time save. It's protecting your life while still ending someone else's. Because a lot of the time, people get really used to this flick right here. And when they get used to that, you can throw them off by changing the level at which you're flicking. Changing the timing, making it to where you are doing anything outside of the norm can really, really impact the game. Another thing you can do is corner peek over ridges. So if they are players, right, what you're going to see there is that you have even stronger, it's called a head glitch, right? In Call of Duty they call them head glitches. And you call them head glitches because they work in that you're not as visible to your target as your target is to you. And that is more or less the basics of combat. When you run into someone that has slip, you can run into them with a knife if you have to. Of course, dynamite works. Oh, I should cover this. So, you should know what ranges to use your weapons at. You'll figure that out on your own, just playtime. But, one of the things that can be extremely useful is if you get really good at this, right? With your sniper rifle, you can hip fire it. I'm bad at it because I'm, bad at the game. But as you see, if you get really good at that, you have an insta-gib on fucking slip. At close range, you have the ability to hip fire sniper rifles. It's just not, a good idea. Now, throwing knives and tomahawks, they also work against slip, even with paint. So they're really valuable. Okay, so when you get in a scenario like this, you can pop heads, you can go for everything you can go for, But that many enemies, especially if they're players, you'd have issues. Now, it's a good thing we died, actually. Everything that I showed you with guns is applicable to tomahawks as well as hatchets, cleavers, stuff like that. but not to melee weapons because you can't aim with them, so you can't dive. So it's important to remember that. Remember that you can also use bolas, fire bottles, dynamite, toxic shine. Any throwable is more or less a counter for slip. That's important to know. Beyond that, always wear a hat because then players may assume you have never without one. And always be prepared to, actually fight. When you get into fights with people one-on-one and their similar skill, do what are called whirlies. That's where you're doing this. When you're moving with your face to the screen, right, like your character's face to the screen, you can flip over your shoulder at any time. And that's really valuable to know. And so because of that, never without one will protect you, and people will shoot your back more often than your face. And in doing that, you can, of course, flick up, kill them, all that stuff. Nothing crazy. Beyond that, know what your weapons' accuracies are. For instance, Mausers are less accurate than semis. So if you're going to be running a build without painted black, Mausers become much closer range. So you got to think about what weapons you have. Lancaster fires fast, but Litchfield does more damage. If you're using paint, why wouldn't you use a Litchfield? You're going to have to just toy with a lot of the systems in the game to figure it out. But the basics of the game are that focus fire, in conjunction with paint, counter or slow and steady very well. Focus fire sniper rifles counter slip extremely well. Slow and steady counter slip extremely well. Slip counters paint almost perfectly. And slow and steady, to a degree, counters focus fire and paint. That system covers most of the actually used cards, and it'll cover 90% of what you have to deal with. Anything you deal with outside of that normal meta is going to be rare, and you're just going to have to learn how you deal with it with the kit you have. For instance, I have a sniper rifle, so of course slip doesn't really bother me, but since I'm not running focus fire on this build, SNS would bother me a little bit. My strat would probably be to put on tomahawks and go 2-chuck them, because it takes 2 tomahawks to kill SNS users. So I mean, you've got to have all your tools at your disposal all the time, and you need to know what all of your tools can do. One of the things I'm going to recommend to everyone is that you organize your horse. So I have every weapon in the game, but I only have 3 sidearms on my horse, and I only have like 4 long arms. And that's because I don't need, the semi-automatic shotgun. I don't need the Litchfield all the time. I have what I need on my horse so that in a fight, I can be like, oh shit, they're running slip, and I can swap to my bow. And it's on my horse. I don't have to look for anything. Or I can be like, oh man, it's a whole bunch of people with focus fire. Let me put a shotgun in and rush them. Oh no, I need to put on slip. Let me put on both my sniper rifles. Stuff like that. Very valuable to have on your horse. But I don't have to think about it. I don't have to tab through 15 weapons to do it. Highly recommended, but make sure you have everything you use. So when I started doing this, I was like, well, I want to have my bolt action for hunting and my varmint rifle. So instead, I just started carrying small game arrows on my bow. You'll have to find your workarounds wherever they are. Beyond that, I recommend, this is a small thing, I recommend that you keep your longer long arm on your shoulder, because then it pokes up, but it doesn't lead as much. When you have, like, for instance, the rolling block on your back, it pokes out like 2 feet almost to your left, so it can give you away in certain times. So just be aware of that. Another strat you can use there is that your more used weapon needs to be the one that's on your back, because then you don't have one poking out. And you're just going to have to work with what you got and figure out what you need. Really and truly, that's all I have for you. I hope that it works out for you. If you have any questions, feel free to pose them in the comments. If I'm wrong about anything, please tell me. Thank you.